hard problem in most companies is actually working with legacy code. It's not a greenfield code. Like the hard problem is like, now the moment you are able to put things in place that can abstract the legacy away from you or even better, intelligently retool the legacy for you, you're taking like a ton of work out of the way. Folks are able to like literally join and start deploying same day, right? It used to be one of those aspirational things. I think a good mental model that I use is, if you think of a triangle where one corner is the founders, the other corner is the GPs, like the Sequoias of the world, and the third corners are LPs, people who want to invest in early stage venture or venture more broadly. Right? AngelList is smack in the middle of the triangle. Right? Our sole purpose is to make sure that the sides of this triangle are getting stronger and stronger, because these three are the pillars of innovation economy.
My guest today is Goutham. Goutham is the CTO of AngelList, a platform that is used by startups, investors, and fund managers. Many of my startups' investments have been on AngelList, so it's nice to have Goutham from AngelList. Goutham was previously Senior Director of Engineering at Coinbase, a co-founder and CEO of MySycamore, which is a Y Combinator company, and was engineering lead at Coursera. Today, we'll talk about a couple of different topics. One is the business of AngelList, how AngelList is leveraging Gen AI to build new products and features, and how are they innovating beyond the status quo by supporting some of the crypto primitives. If this is the first time you're listening to the startup project, thanks for joining in. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also subscribe to us on Substack at startupproject.substack.com. Goutham, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Really, really excited to be here.
So to set the context for the conversation, can you give a quick introduction, a 2-minute intro of who Goutham is, what was your journey before joining AngelList as a CTO?
For sure. I'm not going to rehash the things you just said, but I'd say my journey largely revolved around key levers that can personally change someone's life, which is largely education and access to financial tools. Right? It started at Coursera, where we tried to democratize access to good education, and then moved on to my own company, like furthering that journey, and then to Coinbase, which democratized access to better financial tools and using crypto as a methodology. Now I'm continuing on that path to democratize access to capital, right? And access to capital is probably the single best innovation hack we could do to creating more startups. And AngelList is in the business of creating more startups, creating more tools for the founders and builders. And I'm really excited to continue that journey there.
Talk a little bit about, for those people who are not aware of AngelList. I mean, if you're a founder, who has explored AngelList products, or if you're an investor who was raised on AngelList, I think you're pretty well aware. Most of my startup portfolio is actually on AngelList, and my investing journey started with AngelList India, actually. So talk to me a little bit about what are the different products on AngelList, and what are the core business drivers among those products, because you have rolling funds, you have venture funds, you have syndicates. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think a good mental model that I use is, if you think of a triangle where one corner is the founders, the other corner is the GPs, like the Sequoias of the world, and the third corners are LPs, people who want to invest in early stage venture or venture more broadly, right? AngelList is smack in the middle of the triangle, right? Our sole purpose is to make sure that the sides of this triangle are getting stronger and stronger, because these three are the pillars of innovation economy, right? So the first thing you have to believe, right, to believe in the mission of AngelList is that startups are good for the world, right? Like creation of more startups is the way we innovate and is the way we accelerate innovation. Now, post that, we need to identify, so how do we really strengthen each of these pillars? And like the founders, fund managers, and people who want to invest in early stage venture. And I'll quickly talk through what we do to actually strengthen these pillars. So if you're a founder, and maybe surprising to a lot of people, like Robinhood's first check was an AngelList. There are many companies through our RUV product have been able to come in and then say, okay, I'm looking to access good capital, right? And not just dumb money, but like good capital on the platform. I can go to AngelList and start a company, right? Many of my friends have raised on AngelList as well. So we are creating an ecosystem for founders to really take the mental gymnastics around starting a company to really focusing on, like, you focus on building the product, we will build the rails for you to get the capital that you need, which is our RUV product. Now, moving on to the other corner of the triangle, which is you are a fund manager, right? Let's say you are like you're somebody who's like you have a unique hypothesis, you have a unique insight into where you think you can be investing, like, to accelerate this innovation, right? So what do we need? You need two pieces. You need access to good founder opportunities. You need access to good capital that is looking to be invested into this. So that is our core fund admin product, the core GP product. And this is probably the one that AngelList is well known for today, right? You need a lot of tools. So you don't, again, like spend time doing the gymnastics of how do you like actually raise capital and how do you deploy capital, but really focus on what can you do to add maximal value to the founders, right? So our core customer today there is the fund managers. And the third corner of that pillar is the people looking to invest in early stage or venture more broadly. Now, this is probably the one that most people have historically known AngelList for. Like wherever you're in the world, if you're like, okay, I want to like invest, get access. I believe in the startup economy. I want to write my, I don't know, $1,000 check to like $100,000 check. I want to be an angel, right? You go to AngelList. Like there's literally angel in the name, right? Like this is a thing that Naval has envisioned around how do I really democratize the access to early stage venture across the world. And so we provide a number of tools for people who are looking to get their kind of like get their toes wet in the world of angel investing, whether through LP capital products, and these are again our primary customers, right? To sum it up all, right? The way I would think about AngelList as a business is kind of like really think about the triangle between founders, GPs who are looking to run the fund, and then angels, right? And the speed with which we can spin the triangle is essentially innovation. Yeah.
So you joined AngelList, I believe, this year or last year, and you worked in different companies. How is working at AngelList different from working at, say, Coinbase?
Yeah. Very different. Well, right off the bat, crypto in 2017, 2018 was very different than crypto right now. Right? Like to give a specific anecdote there, Nataraj, if you and I met in 2017, and if you told me that, hey, by 2025, we would have Bitcoin ETF or we would have stable coins, most people in crypto would have laughed. It is one of those amazing things where the pace of innovation is so constant, so relentless, and quite frankly, very uplifting. But there is always this overhang of regulatory, like, on top of you, right? And there were many times, especially over the last 4 years, where being at Coinbase felt very much like you're fighting a big institution, you're fighting a regulatory battle, right? That is not something that we face at AngelList day to day. You are like you don't spend thinking about regulation in the way that you would think about in a crypto world. You're really thinking about how do I accelerate capital deployment? How do I bring more efficiency to how capital is being deployed, which is a very different problem space. That's one. Second is uh, to give specific examples of like, how this is more about how Coinbase and crypto are different. The pace of innovation in crypto is insane, right? Like, we had a joke at Coinbase that 1 year in crypto is like 10 years. And there's a popular meme where, 5 years in crypto, somebody has this white beard, like gray hair, right? It's very true. I can personally attest to it, right? And so is eternal optimism, right? So when crypto crowd is probably one of the most optimistic crowd that I've ever worked with, right? It's different. Like, the capital products, while innovation does happen, not at the same pace at which it's happening in the crypto. So that means the way you think about product, you're thinking more from a reliability lens. You're thinking like, longer term, which is very different. Now for the companies, particularly, obviously AngelList is much smaller, much more earlier stage. All in all, we are about 150 people. Coinbase, when I joined, was probably a couple of hundred, but also it's now much bigger company. So definitely it has its own pros and cons.
There is one through line I see between Coinbase and AngelList, which is both sort of were involved in major regulatory changes. Nawal and team were involved in Jobs Act earlier in the day to sort of change and sort of make AngelList and crowdfunding happen really because of Jobs Act and things that were part of Jobs Act led to some of the changes and some of the products on AngelList. And now I think we are seeing that happen in real time with some of the crypto legislative changes. So that is sort of like a through line in both companies. So I want to pivot towards, majority of what I wanted to talk in this conversation is about AI. Post ChatGPT, I think before ChatGPT, I had friends working in machine learning, but we couldn't see like, okay, we're doing recommendation systems, we're doing, sort of predicting text in some format, but we were not able to squint our eyes and see what is next. But once ChatGPT came, then you sort of saw that, okay, you could do a lot more with this current technology. And in my career, I think this is sort of like a game-changing moment. It is one, I was not a huge, um, uh, what do you say? Like, I wouldn't say like, hey, go and bet your career on crypto person, but I would say like, hey, you can go and bet your career on AI person. So that, at least in terms of like big technology arc shifts in my career, I think AI is the first one because by the time I came to workplace, mobile has already been there, search has already been there. I think premiumly we grew up in the SaaS era where you're creating new SaaS products and B2B era where you're selling B2B SaaS products. I think that was sort of like where a little bit of stagnation in terms of new ideas. I think crypto was the only exception in terms of new ideas. That is sort of this is going to be a long, really big cycle of innovation. But I wanted to quickly, get your thoughts on, what you think of Gen AI and this current AI hype cycle, and your general or 20,000 feet thoughts about it.
Yeah, for sure. Let me dial back the clock a little bit here, right? I don't know if your audience is familiar with Coursera. It was an education platform that started in 2011, and our first major success was a machine learning course by Andrew Ng, right? So we all worked for Andrew.
Actually, the course I've taken, a lot of my friends have taken out of college because Andrew and I mean, a lot of people don't know, but like he pioneered machine learning in a lot of ways, like especially education of machine learning. I think there a lot of credit goes to Andrew and
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think a lot of people, especially in deep learning, probably got their start with Andrew. And at Coursera, we were incredibly excited about it. And not just from a pure like technology perspective, but also the audience and the learning, like, these were the most subscribed courses on the platform, right? Now, the thing that was different back then was it was still largely a research problem. So it's the sort of thing where you want to involve at an intellectual level, but it was harder for you to think about what is an actual go-to-market motion. Even back when I was starting my own company and 2016, 2017, there was a running joke within YC that, hey, all you had to do was attach .ai to your domain and you automatically would raise a bunch of money. So there was definitely like, hype cycle number two also happening in 2017. Different about this particular iteration is one, it moved from being a research problem to an engineering problem, right? Where you could say like, hey, I'm going to like take the model in a box, assume that somebody has already done all the heavy lifting. Now I'm really trying to figure out what are the other things in the ecosystem that I need to connect to actually make sense out of this. And that's been incredible to see. Second is utility of it, right? Is the utility back in the first, I would say, cycle of like, at least my experience, 2012, 2013 machine learning, 2016, 17 AI is the utility. You really have to squint your eyes and like there was always human in the loop. Like, there were many AI companies back then with many human in the loop, like practices and processes, and the utility was not obvious, right? Like you have to bet that hey, one day this thing will actually be at a point where you will see like real feedback and real feedback loops. But we are in a world where like you can parse a PDF instantly in a couple of seconds, maybe less than a second now, or you could do voice translation. So what that does is that so now you bring these two ideas together, right? It's an engineering problem. Utility is instant, so that means you have a very fast feedback loop, right? You and I can spend the next 20 minutes, and then we can literally build something, like to put it out in the world, and actually see how people are interacting with it, and that is very very powerful. And that obviously led to like a lot of adoption and like things that we were seeing in the last couple of years. So that's one. Second is a lot of what's happening today reminds me of like so my first start was actually at Bloomberg, like this was 2008 or so, and Bloomberg was a very traditional finance company based out of New York, and all of their deployment was on like actual physical machines, right? They owned their data center. the idea that we would move to a cloud was so crazy back then. Like, AWS was just taking off in a reasonably big way. But it was just like, seemed pretty crazy that like, you would someday be like, deploying all of these in a cloud, right? But now most people don't even like think about it. Like, you're not, I don't know if people remember this. There were companies like Rackspace, like, that was super hot back then. And people would be like talking about, oh, did you get access to the latest chip? And I'd bet that most people, founders who are starting companies today are not actively thinking about what specific machine is being deployed in their AWS cluster, right? They're assuming that compute is available, resources are available, and they're really focused on a different dimension of the problem. I think about AI similarly in the sense that uh, I think 4 5, maybe even sooner than that, we won't think of AI as like an extension. It's more like something that you just naturally assume is already happening, right? Just the way you think about cloud deployments today, right? It is not integral to your strategy. You assume that that capability is already there, and you're going to harness it, and then you're going to like take advantage of it. So that's been like really fascinating to see, right? So how does that translate to? Let me just pause there before saying more.
Yeah, I think what you're saying without actually saying it's much more of like a horizontal shift. Or like it's the best way I've heard this being described is this is sort of like you've added a new intelligence layer. So just like we've added a horizontal cloud layer where everything can be deployed, I think now we are adding a new horizontal intelligence layer. So that's why you see like pretty much every app that is existing that we use has some use case already implemented using AI. Similar to like every app that was on premises could be moved to cloud. It just took some time for us to change our mind and the tooling to get there. And with AI, it's much more easier because everyone has access to API and we all build using APIs all the time. So it's much more easier to adopt as well. So it became very quickly, we saw this massive adoption. What do you think of the use cases that are most exciting for you as a CTO? And also talk a little bit about, how are you at AngelList adopting AI in, different ways?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two interesting questions there. Like, what is very exciting to me sitting where I am, and also what is very exciting to the business, right? Um, to me, on the first one, it is so interesting to see the blurring of the roles, right? Like I say, even 3 years ago, if you want to build an MVP, what do you do? Like you're like, okay, first question, who's going to be the designer of this project? Next question, who's writing the PRD of the project? Then there's like a discussion around who is going to be building this project, right? And then that's a lot of overhead. Like, I mean, we might not have realized it 3 4 years ago because we all took it for granted, just like we all took it for granted that we all need to be in a building to actually do the work versus like, now, oh, yeah, this idea that everybody has to go to a place to just work seems a little bit crazy. Uh, so this sort of like, hey, this very well defined compact in a box role is very much the norm, right? Like, even back in 2021 and 2020. Today, like our chief legal officer, like when he tweets about it, he builds end-to-end product himself, right?
Yeah.
Like that includes the design, that includes the spec, PRD, he releases it, he's tracking analytics. Our designer is building like end-to-end products, like, our intern is building end-to-end. So we really went from like role in a box to product in a box, right? Like effectively we have like this full spectrum of skills that are very much available to you. So what that means is uh, previously for you to convince me that, hey, we should invest in that now effectively became, here's what I've already done. Like, I spent like half a day, like I vibe coded it or like, did whatever. And here's what this thing is going to look like, right? And the conversations become so much more sharper on a day-to-day basis to a point where I think like it's already happening in many of the SF-based companies, and I think it will only accelerate this idea that you have to go through multiple iterations to even define what you're doing will become so outdated, and the roles become so blurry, right? It is increasingly becoming hard to say, like, what is the role of a product person and the engineer, like the things we have taken for granted. So that's very interesting to see. Second is, again, staying with the theme of what do I see, like, interesting changes happening is something that probably most of the audience is aware of is your ability to deploy and get the boilerplate out of the way has been like huge. Like, so I wouldn't go too much into it because most people probably have been exposed to Cursor or Windsurf or any of that, like, because the hard problem in most companies is actually working with legacy code. It's not the greenfield code. Like the hard problem is like, now the moment you are able to put things in place that can abstract the legacy away from you or even better, intelligently retool the legacy for you, you're taking like a ton of work out of the way, right? And that's been like very interesting to see. We are able to now see folks are able to like literally join and start deploying same day, right? It used to be one of those aspirational things, like, where we would say, yeah, like, we would love for you to deploy on day one. Now it's almost like an expectation, right? Like, because of all the tooling that's available around you. And the third is um, sort of kind of goes back to like what the phrasing you use, like, what is the base level expectation, right? I have this view that it will be increasingly hard to see a good role for yourself if you don't become very quickly AI native, right? Meaning being able to understand which tools create maximal leverage, and it almost feels like, hey, am I late? Like, you're not late, but now is a good time to start, right? Because I can clearly see teams that have adopted AI and the way they are shipping, the way they're moving, and the teams that have still lagging behind. The difference is so clear, so obvious, right? That we have now a default expectation that, like, everybody's trying out this tool, right? Even if you're skeptical to begin with, go try it, experiment with it, because more and more that is becoming the default expectation.
Among the teams that didn't try or like not AI native, what do you see the blockers are like? Or what is preventing those teams to become AI native versus one team becomes AI native?
Yeah. Um, I don't think it is a philosophical stance or anything. It is more of a inertia and momentum thing. Or you could also be skeptical too, right? You could say like, I don't maybe not quite believe it, right? And for what it's worth, I was skeptical at one point as well. I like if you're an engineer today and if you have not tried one of uh, the IDEs, like, like whether it's a Cursor or a Windsurf or Copilot, doesn't matter. Like whatever like tickles your fancy, you're already behind today, right? And we see it, right? We see it like day to day, right? So inertia could be a big component of it. Second, there are some good reasons not to do it, by the way, depending on which team you're in. Like, for example, if you're in security or if you're in a very, very critical path where you do want to make sure you're spending that extra time, attention. And there are, like, Coinbase is a good example. Like, we had a lot of concern internally around what we might accidentally expose, right? Because a lot of these are also like primitives that are being built right now. So there could be some other reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I always call AI as right now that it's draft AI because it gets you the draft pretty fast, pretty quick. But if like I'm reporting to my leadership, business numbers, I want to at the end of the day depend on myself to review each of the lines, even if I use AI to write it or draft it. So like you can see that pattern pretty much play out in everything. Like there are companies which are generating short clips, based out of your videos. It's pretty
Yeah.
good at getting to the 95%, but it will make a mistake on that 5%, and the title will be wrong, the guest name will be wrong, or the description will not actually match with what you want to say, or it's too cheesy, or it's too not matching your style. So the 5% is where I think you still need the manual intervention, but that 95% is actually a really big time savior. Can you talk a little bit about some examples on how you're using AI in your own products in AngelList?
Yeah. Yeah. Now that comes to part two, right? So let's talk a little bit about like our customer type, because then I can tie it to like how the products could be better. On a typical fund deployment, let's say, Nataraj, you want to like say, okay, I have this specific point of view on where I think innovation is going to come from, and I have this group of people out there who are willing to back me. Like, let's say you want to raise a $50 million fund or a $100 million fund, right? There is a lot of workflows you go through that are sequential, whether it's legal, like, that are extremely boilerplate, that are dependent on a lot of like movement within, whether it's AngelList or other similar companies, right? There's a lot of internal workflows that need to be executed on, right? And one of the metrics we track religiously is how long does it take for you to actually deploy your fund or raise your fund or get set up for a fund. And we are increasingly using a lot of AI and automation to do that, right? Or things like this might be surprising, but it's actually more common than people think. You might have signed a legal doc that said something here, and then maybe because usually in a fund formation, there are like tens, if not hundreds of docs that you're working with and your investors and whatnot. And you could have said something else, without inadvertently or without realizing that completely changes the structure of how you think about your fund. So one of the things we do is doc parsing, being able to parse the doc and being able to give the information that is very relevant to you and being able to automate your deployment, which reduces again, now going back to the theme is the thing that we always think about is how do we efficiently deploy this capital for you, right? So that be integral to that is how can we simplify the fund formation? That's one. The second is, so I'll talk about operational and I'll also talk about the specific products in a second. So once you have your fund deployed, right, the thing that AngelList is known for a lot is the venture associates and the quality of service, right? And it comes at a cost. We take it very seriously. We want to make sure that you are getting the best service. At the same time, we want to enable our internal teams to very quickly get access to data at their fingertip. For example, they're walking into a call with a GP and they want to know, okay, what are this GP's main concerns? Or how can I GP has a question around, hey, can you pull up a doc, or do you think my legal terms are a certain thing are different than standard, right? A couple of years ago, that would be like half a day's task, right? Now we have built enough internal tooling where our internal customer support and venture associate teams can, in most cases, auto resolve, right? Because we have built infrastructure that will pull, make sense, and then spit out exactly what the customer is looking for. And in some cases, human curate what has already been sort of the draft AI, right? We are able to quickly generate an answer and then get back to the customer. Again, it kind of feeds into the cycle of the more we can close the feedback loops, the more efficient we can be, but it's faster for you to really focus on the things that you need. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is AngelList is sitting on a gold mine of data, right? If you think about the world today, some of the hardest resource to get to is early stage venture, right? I'd imagine everybody in this room would have loved to be part of, I don't know, Anthropic Series A or Seed or Perplexity Seed, right? So there are hundreds and thousands of companies on the platform today who are raising money, and there are a lot of opportunities. The GPs are bringing to the investors saying that here is an opportunity for you to potentially invest in a category defining company, right? And all of this data is flowing through the plumbing and the pipes, right? And there is a tremendous opportunity here where we can drive deep insights into what's happening with your portfolio, right? We can tell you that this is exactly where you're invested in. This is an opportunity that you could potentially be missing. How is your fund performing compared to the rest of the funds on the platform? And giving that level of insight would have and traditional funds do this, right? If you talk to a Sequoia and Recent, they have swarms of people whose job is to literally do this work, right? We are now able to start doing some of that, using AI, what again kind of goes back to what used to be a massive research problem now is essentially an engineering problem. We are able to scan through thousands of documents, extract deep insights and come back to you with something meaningful that can potentially change how you're investing today.
Yeah, I mean, based on my experience also, I could see so many ways. I used to write syndicate documents for my LPs. Now I could just put raw information into and generate a pitch for my LPs, on why they should invest in. Talk a little bit about your crypto integration as well, because you come from Coinbase. I know AngelList was one of the first adopters of Circle, I think a couple of years back. I forgot when. And then I also saw this recent announcement about Robinhood doing some of the secondary transactions, and where the shares are actually stored on a ledger on blockchain. Is that a path that AngelList is looking towards? Something that you are considering, and if you are considering, why is it better than the current way of doing things?
Yeah. We can spend many hours on the Robinhood thing. I have a lot of opinions. Let me talk about the first one. This is to me one of the one of the best opportunities for AngelList. Like if you think about this ecosystem, AngelList is squarely in the middle of a lot of flow of funds. They're able to see LP capital deployed. They're able to see like investor capital. They're able to see distributions. And this is like sort of like this. I would almost say, if I was wearing my Coinbase hat for a second, a dream scenario for somebody in crypto, right? Like, because you could influence in a very meaningful way on how crypto could be adopted in either in any of this. And one thing that we have done very concretely today is we enable USDC funding. So if you're a startup that is raising money with USDC, you can AngelList allows you to do that at no fee, right? And we have seen a pretty significant adoption of that. And there are good reasons why you want to maybe do USDC, whether it's for cross international or cross wires or cross border wires and whatnot. The second interesting opportunity is, and I'll talk you through like a few tranches of this, right? A lot of, and also for crypto companies, for a lot of them, distributions happen through crypto tokens. Us being able to support that effectively means that if you're a crypto company that has an exit, now your investors are able to get and keep those tokens on the AngelList platform, and we are able to support it as well. Now, moving on to a couple of other topics on crypto, right? I think stable coins is probably some of the most exciting area right now, right? Because they almost instantaneous, it's near instant settlement, drastically simplifies cross-border wires, which is actually for many people who have never dealt with it, is actually a massive, massive pain, right? Working through and working sort of threading through the needle of regulatory and then KYC ML, and actually it could be something as simple as let's say if you have family in the UK who are yep, Nataraj is starting a company and I want to invest in, it's not that easy. It's actually incredibly complicated, right? And processing all of this cross-border wires. And this is something we are seriously thinking about, right? Again, kind of goes back to how do we make capital more efficient, deployment more efficient?
Does the complication come from lack of banking rails or more about regulation?
They're intertwined, right? Like for banking in particular, regulation determines, when I say regulation, I'm using a very broad category of KYC, AML, capital requirements, right, and whatnot. That directly influences what you can or cannot do, right? And that it can all be done, just to be clear, right? You can make it happen, but the friction of doing it in a way that is founder first or GP first is easier said than done. Which is where I think we can see a tremendous opportunity for stable coins, right? And this is an area where we are seriously thinking about how can we make stable coins a primary citizen on the platform, right? Potentially, can we enable digital wallets for all the customers or for all the LPs, right? There's a lot of interesting ideas for us to explore that come from more of a crypto first. Now, the second bucket that we kind of alluded to is tokenization. So this is an entirely, just to give some context, the concept itself is not new. Even in 2017 or 2018, tokenization was very much a thing. Now, let me marry it to why it becomes really interesting in the context of private markets, like AngelList is largely in. So what has changed over the last 7 or 8 years is companies are increasingly choosing to stay private. Like if you look at the Stripe or 100 billion plus, OpenAI 300 billion plus, Anthropic, I don't know, 60, 80, I don't know. Crazy to think about it, because even 7, 8 years ago, once you hit a 10 to 12 billion valuation, the thing you do is you go public. So what does it mean, right? In the context of private markets, that means your capital is locked much longer than what you had historically seen, right? And there's a beautiful graph I was reading the other day where, it kind of shows almost the amount of time capital is locked. So if you're an investor, you're really happy that this valuation is going bonkers. All power to you. But at the end of the day, this is on paper, right? This is not liquidity yet, right? And liquidity is really important because it is going to fuel the next generation of startups, right? And you can see this pattern. The startups that funded, when Facebook exited, the 2012s of the world, you can see all of that capital coming back into the venture ecosystem and funding the next generation of startups. So this cycle is actually pretty important. And one of the things that we are seriously thinking about is how do we create liquidity for the GPs on the platform? How do we create liquidity for the investors on the platform? Now, why is this hard? The hard thing here is incentive alignment. right? Like I'll talk about the technology and I'll also talk about the incentive alignment, right? The incentive specifically between the founders and the CFOs, the fund managers and the platform, right? That is actually a non-trivial problem because most founders by default might not prefer to see like some sort of liquidity before they actually have made up their mind, because it does inform how they are thinking about future fundraisers. It does inform or potentially influence their valuation mechanics. On the technology side, which is where things get super exciting. Now, tokenization is a reality. Like, and I was reading the news yesterday that Goldman and BNY Mellon are going to be tokenizing a number of money market funds, and that means that you are now able to you don't have to KYC and AML over and over and over again, participate in purchasing some of these tokens, right? And we are seriously thinking about what is the way we can bring the regulatory framework, bring the tokenization framework, and KYC AML together that can create liquidity for the funds on the platform, create good incentives for the founders of the platform to participate in it, and more importantly, sort of do it in a very decentralized way.
I could also see when you make things easier, you sort of expand the market, right? I could also see for example, secondary transactions usually are getting blocked because you have sort of asymmetry between demand and supply. There's sometimes more demand but less supply. Sometimes there's a supply but there's no demand, and that timing has to align for a secondary transaction to complete. And this is a problem you often see in secondary transactions. I'm sure. I mean, AngelList also has these transactions, but if you go to primarily secondary only transaction platforms like Liquidity or other platforms, you see that you're always trying to align the timing between the buyer and seller, and it's not instantaneous because there are multiple players in between that have to verify the transaction. But in a tokenized world, it could be much faster and easier because all the verification is done, and it's as good as transferring your coins from one wallet to another wallet. If that's that's the simplest way you can group a transaction between multiple wallets and execute it. So I could see a place where you can unlock a lot of these use cases much faster. Like if I want to buy some equity in a fund, and there are plenty of funds already on AngelList, but to enable the transaction, it's actually much more costly, and there's a lot more friction in doing something like that. And you need a lot more resources, and that limits at what level you could do that. The entry point at which you could do that kind of a transaction is also limited because there's so much cost per transaction. Um, can you talk about what else are you doing in terms of what we can see in terms of future leveraging AI in AngelList? What are the products that are some of the upcoming products that we can look forward to?
Yeah, makes sense. One last comment I want to make on what you just said is that also the hidden fees, right? People might not realize this, but when you do a secondary, some of these fees could get very predatory, right? Because you are in a world of asymmetric information. And when you are in asymmetric information, and to me, this is the most powerful thing about decentralized on-chain world, right? Is that now, by definition, crypto tries to create information symmetry, right? And that's a very, very powerful construct for us all to identify. Okay, to the specific question of AI, right? Again, our goal is to make you to move capital very efficiently between this founder, the Sequoias of the world, or the people who are raising this money and deploying this, and also folks who are investing into this ecosystem, right? And you can imagine a world where every single one of these constituents could benefit from it, not just analysis but insights, right? Now, to me, this has been the big shift, right? AI has existed in a different form before, which is largely analysis, right? And most people might be familiar with NLP type techniques, right? Is that, hey, I have this large chunk of data, how do I analyze and answer this very specific question about which country has the highest growth rate on a certain dimension? That is the classic analysis. Insight is different because insight is you don't know what you're looking for, right? You don't know whether it may or may not be possible for you to even construct a question around what you're looking for, right? And to me, that has been a very powerful shift in how we are using Gen AI, is that now we can actually drive insight. And the models are getting so much better that insight is now commoditized. And if you think about it, like there is an entire fields of thousands and millions of people who are working, whose primary job is to generate insight. The historically big funds were always able to afford it, like I said, like, and recent would have like an entire in-house team whose primary job is to really generate insights. Now we are able to democratize access to that, right? Some of the things that we are building, give like a deep insight into the GP's activity, right? Or let's say if you're a first-time angel investor and you're coming to the platform and you're like, you don't know what you don't know. Like you don't know where you wanna invest. You don't know what is. Once you get past the glossary of terms around syndicates and all that, you're really looking for like, hey, how do I even think of? I want to invest $2,000 in I want to maybe $20,000. I want to become an angel investor. You don't know where to start. And over the last many years, what we have done is we have built the tools to get you started, but now the insight piece really adds a level of information to you that historically has been missing. Where you could ask okay, tell me more about this company, right? What are the other things that I should be thinking about? Or you can come in and then say I have a specific point of view on, I don't know, drones, right? Which company should I be investing in? Or and upon the fundraising side, we can tell things like, how are you doing overall compared to the market? Are there things that you're overexposed, are you underexposed, or can we help you construct a beautiful brief that you can send to your investors, right? Or who are the people? What are the movements between these companies that you should be paying attention to? All of this helps you, and our belief is that they will help you make a better decision, right? In terms of how your fund is doing and how your capital is being deployed.
Yeah, I think also it improves the trust, and a lot of times what happens is people come on to AngelList, invest in wrong deals, early deals, and then they leave and they never come back. I think I've seen that in my network as well, and that's because of lack of education and not knowing which is a good deal versus a bad deal. That sort of education takes a while to get used to. I think we have one audience question from Alvin. As the lines are blurring, what skills should product managers invest in building?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I was thinking about this the other day. Okay, let's kind of go back to what has changed significantly, right? The thing that has changed is your ability to go from an idea to seeing it in the world has dramatically changed, right? Like if you actually really zoom out over the last 20 years, right, it would take a tremendous amount of money and capital for you to even get started, right? And today, you could spend a weekend and then ship things that 15 years ago needed to be a startup that is funded with $10 million to do, right? So now how does that tie to product manager, right? I personally think the most powerful thing product managers have today that they didn't have before is an ability to take their product iteration and idea and put it out in the world, gather actual data, and then come back to the table and then say, here is something I thought about. Here are whether you call it vibe coding or whatever it is, here's an MVP that I was able to build for myself. I'm not stuck in multiple rounds of prioritization. Here are 10 people I have shown this MVP to, and here's the information I received. That is just so powerful and so empowering for the product manager. Versus, to be frank, was the case not even 4 or 5 years ago. It's hey, here is my beautiful PRD. Here are all the ways we need to do. Let's go to prioritization meetings. Let's go to let's try to get this 1 or 2 engineering resources. Let me get the design resources. The classic role of a product manager as an information router is quickly disappearing, right? So if you are purely serving the purpose of, hey, I'm just routing information and doing prioritization, you're in trouble, right? We have moved on to a world where product managers are actually empowered to very quickly generate these prototypes and take them to market, bring them to the table. Yeah, that's what I would invest in right now.
I think one thing I would add is I think it's a good time to sort of go all in and learn as much as skills as possible. I think because everyone keeps asking hey, what to do. I think the what to do is basically go really hard on learning, how the model works and what can you leverage. And I think we keep hearing this phrase it will not be replaced by AI, but it'll be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. I think be better at someone else than using AI. And There's another thing that also is interesting that is happening in big companies or big or small companies is if you're like a tech savvy person who knows how to write code, but you're not really contributing that code to the product, but to your internal workflows and processes. I think now you have much more scope to do that in optimizing your internal workflows or creating new dashboards or communicating better and faster and sort of get more ROI from your coding skills that you're not able to because then you couldn't contribute to the product, but then now you can use that coding to like a wide variety of internal tasks with Replit or some of these tools. Like you can create things that were not otherwise possible. I think that's another way to sort of differentiate yourself within an organization.
Yeah. Can I add something to that? Every week we have this AI demos. I am like blown away by the things people are building. I would say 60 to 70% of the demos are from non-engineers, right? Meaning people who have historically maybe not written a lot of code or haven't interfaced directly with coding tools. The kind of things that they're able to build and actually deploy, right? It's not like just a proof of concept, but like I was seeing a demo yesterday where somebody's like built like their own auto email responder that helps to quickly get back to LPs, right? We have somebody on talent who has like automated a whole bunch of like performance review stuff, right? Never written a line of code in their life, but spent like a few weeks and then now have an end-to-end product that we actually use in the company, right? And this has just been so incredible to see. And again, it kind of goes back to if there was never a time where you're sitting and then thinking that, oh, I have this idea and it'll be so cool to see it. There's never been a better time to just go spend time on actually building it. Like the tooling is just incredible right now.
Yeah, I think tooling, there's so many tools to explore. I mean, just in exploring itself, there's a lot of time taken. It's good to like pick what you want to focus on and like iterate. I think that's the real challenge right now. We have one more question from Daniel. He says, can I partner on a female first model with AngelList?
Daniel, can you say more? Like when you said freemium, did I hear freemium?
Yeah, I think he's a founder building a platform to help more startups grow and survive. Is there can we make a custom solution that I don't know. I don't fully understand the question, but I think he's looking to partner with AngelList.
Happy to chat. Um, I think okay. I'm before the talk about happy to chat, Daniel. Again, we fundamentally believe that like by adding more leverage to the founders, like capital is a way that we have chosen. But if there are things that we could help with, absolutely happy to.
One more question I have, I think before we wrap up is, I know Product Hunt is owned by AngelList. Are you also responsible for running Product Hunt? If so, like, what are some of the exciting things that we can look forward in Product Hunt?
Yeah, I'm not responsible for running Product Hunt. I know that AngelList has an interest in Product Hunt, but since I don't run it, I can't quite answer it. But I can give my perspective as as a founder who has used Product Hunt, and many of you maybe have. The place where it has really helped me is as a signaling for both recruiting and also for raising capital. I think it is some early signal around like how much excitement there is, around your product or your thinking, and also get good feedback. Yeah.
Product Hunt is, I think, one of the most popular product out there, and you see a lot of AI demos I discovered on Product Hunt, because people are trying to post their MVPs there and try to get traction. So it's a fun way to like whenever you're bored and want to discover new products, I always go to Product Hunt for that. Thanks, Gautam. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing your insights and time. And thanks everyone on the chat joining in for the conversation. Tomorrow we have same time another conversation with the CTO of Buck. So don't forget to join for that. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me. And nice to meet you all. Yeah.